Welcome to Cemeteriat. Cemeteriat is a WordPress plugin that allows you to manage your website for your small, historic, or private cemetery. In this presentation, I'd like to show you how to import an initial set of data into Cemeteriat using the import feature. This is typically something that people want to do when they're first setting up the website and not something they continue to do, and I'll talk about that in a bit. The first thing we want to do, you're looking here at just my local developer test site, and it has no data in it. So I'm going to go to the admin screen, Tools, actually Settings, Cemeteriat. I'm going to check out what my settings are and make sure they're set the way I want to. Now here I have a simple cemetery website, so I don't need all of these areas. So I'm going to indicate the ones I do want to use. I want to use row, and I want to use plot, and I want to use subplot, and I want them displayed in that order. And instead of calling it plot, I want to call it a lot. All the rest of these can be left as default. I'm going to disable the invoice because I don't care about invoicing, although that has nothing to do with the import I'm going to do. I don't want to hide my burial location. I'm okay with all the default features, and I do want to turn debug mode on. So I'm going to save that. And to review, the only location fields I've got is row, plot, and subplot. Now I'm going to go to Tools, Cemeteriat. Third item on the list is Import Data. Now, as I started to say before, importing data from a comma delimited file is something you want to do when you have an empty database, not something that you want to do once you've already started entering data. This is not the main way to get data into Cemeteriat. It's just a good way to get the database populated with data you may already have. Now, typically, what you're going to see here under Define Columns is a list of different columns that you can import. Sometimes, after you've exited the program, the list of columns disappears, and I'll make sure that they're available on the website. For your information, the website can be found at cemeteriat.edforbecky.net. And you can also find information about Cemeteriat at edforbecky.net. Look under support, and you can find a Cemeteriat section as well as a Cemeteriat support forum, and this is where I'll document the set of columns that can be imported. What you're going to end up doing is customizing this list by defining both the order and the number of columns, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. What I want to do now is take you to the file I'm going to import. Now, this is a simple file. It has the deceased's name, last name, first name, birth information, date, death date, the row that they're buried in, the lot that they're buried in, and the sublot that they're buried in. And typically a sublot is used when maybe a husband and wife share a cemetery plot. That's what sublot is used for, to delineate that. So I know that the first, let me see if I can display these both on the screen. The first thing is going to be deceased last, followed by deceased first, followed by deceased birth date, followed by deceased, and I'll pause here so you don't have to watch me type in all the information. Okay, so I've entered all the fields. I've got the deceased last name, the deceased first name, the deceased birth date, the deceased death date. I can expand this, make it a little easier to read here. The row, the plot, and the subplot. Now, it's critical that the order be correct and that you use, you remember I renamed plot on the options screen, but I still want to use the word plot here. That's true of all the location fields. It's critical that the number of columns in the defined columns list matches the number of columns in your CSV file, and that's even true if the information is blank. Now here you'll see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, but then I've got a stray comma at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That stray comma is going to mess things up, and this row would be skipped. So I can remove that. And I check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fields here. So this should be good. Now, the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a note about the location. I'll show you where that ends up. I'm going to just say this one's in the center of the cemetery. And I'm not going to add a location here, but I need to have the field, so I'm going to add a stray comma at the end, and that'll indicate that there's one more field, and this should work just fine. I'm going to save my CSV file. So it's called test.csv. And now I choose that file. Let's see, did I put it on my desktop? I did not. It's in my downloads folder, test CSV. I've got all that matched up, and now I hit import. Now you see right away it says I found 8 columns and I was expecting 7. And again, found 8, was expecting 7. Found 1 column of data, expecting 7. So what happened here? Well, I added that extra column, but I didn't add the column description, which was location notes. Alright, now that takes care of the 8 columns of data expecting 7, but why do I have one that's 1 column of data expecting 7? If I look back at my CSV, you see I got a blank line at the end. Normally that would just be skipped. I don't want the error at all, so I'm going to try it again. Select my file again. Everything looks good, and I import. And my screen comes back, import complete. I don't have any errors that popped up at the top. Now if I go to pages, you'll see that under the headstone page, I've got 2 pages here. If I go to my site and look under the headstones menu item, there's 2 pages listed. If I select Edward Denver, so I've got his birth year and death year. There's my location note that I added, and there's the row, and you see that's listed as lot, not plot. And there's the subplot. I didn't indicate any other information like an obituary or default images, so those stay the same. Check out Sylvester Michaels. And you see again, I've got a birth and death date and a burial location, and I've basically imported 2 people using the import feature. Now let's go back and talk a little bit more about the import feature. First, let's talk about what could go wrong. Well, we saw one thing that could go wrong. If the number of columns doesn't match the number of columns in the comma delimited file, every row that doesn't match will be skipped. Additionally, if the location indicators, here I have row, plot, and subplot, if they are not unique, any duplication at that level will result in that row being skipped. So I was working with a file earlier today. It had 1,600 records to be imported. When I imported it into and saw how many pages were created, I had 600 out of the 1,600 imported. What happened? Well, what I discovered when I looked at the file was very similar to this. They had a lot of shared lots, So the row and the lot indication were exactly the same. They did not have the concept of subplot. So I had to add a subplot, and subplot, maybe your cemetery doesn't deal with subplots. Within Cemeteriat, you need to use something to make sure that each plot is unique. So shared plots are fine as long as you assign each person to their own subplot within the plot. So those are a couple things that can go wrong. Sometimes the errors don't pop up. PHP's a little bit funny. If you have access to your, let's see if I can show you here. If within your website you have access to your Apache logs, sometimes the errors will show up under the error log. Sometimes they'll show up here under the PHP error log. Here you see that I've got duplicates, so it's skipping it. I had quite a few duplications here. Here was my found 8, expecting 7 errors here. It can be real tricky to import data the first time, usually because there's something wrong with your CSV file. For instance, if I had entered, if there was a comma in any of my comment fields, that creates a problem because the CSV thinks that it's a separate field, and you end up with your column counts off. If you use comma in your date fields, comma in your name, anything like that will mess it up. So these are things that can go wrong. In this case, we're lucky. We ended up with the 2 files we tried to import. And I just want to revisit one more warning. And I can't emphasize enough that importing a file when data already exists in the database may have undesirable results. When duplicate names exist, Cemeteriat will always overwrite the existing data with new data. If the plot already exists and is in use by someone else, the duplicate will be skipped. So this is a good way to initiate your Cemeteriat database with a few hundred plots if you have that data available in another system. But once you start maintaining the data within Cemeteriat, you're always going to want to go to the Add a Plot screen and manage your plots and the information about your deceased from this screen. That's it for how to import data into Cemeteriat using comma delimited files. I hope that you found this video helpful, and I thank you for your time.